Hello, and welcome to the Read Write Book Club. This is our second episode reading Satan, His Psychotherapy and Eventual Cure. Is that what the title is? I have the cover here because unfortunately detached from my book. His Psychotherapy and Cure by the Unfortunate Dr. Kassler is our book. We're going to be reading the second half. I am your host, MC Pepperpockets. aka Sam, my co-host Brendan, and our special guest and the bringer of this book to the podcast / stream, Wicked West.
Hello.
So where did we leave off last time?
We left off right before Dante's Inferno.
Right. Oh yes. Right. Yeah. They were about to get in line for the sixth sex club, named Dante's Inferno, with no possible foreshadowing available here at all.
No.
Definitely not.
What do you call it when it's shadowing after the fact?
Post shadowing, I guess.
That's what I was thinking, because it's also post shadowing.
I mean, I think that's just like the things that happen after. But yeah. So yeah, it's interesting because like we already know they're in hell, right? Like because the city is so conspicuously an analogy to the rings of hell, with the hospital at the center. But like then they decide to go to the Inferno, and actually, I guess what I thought was really interesting was the tension they build up prior to actually getting in, like them waiting in line as its own kind of ring of hell. Actually, you know what? That's the first ring, is limbo, is waiting before you even get into hell. And I love that Levin the author drops in like at the end of the first two chapters, like, and they take one more step closer to hell, and then like something even worse happens, and it's like, oh, and now they're right on the precipice of hell. So yeah, this is really where Kassler's life starts to spiral the drain in a really aggressive way. And it's weird because like I felt that going into the Inferno both was the catalyst for the sort of total destruction of his life and his ability to kind of get over it.
Yeah. It's where we start seeing a return of his psychosis.
Yeah, for sure. Because he has...
He literally has a mental break right at the end.
Oh,
Yep.
where is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The severe sexist breakdown, as they describe it. And it's like, I'm sorry, Sai, you need to shut up now, because you appear to be going insane and having a severe sexist breakdown.
Yeah.
Which I thought was one of the realest lines in like any book ever, because he starts like rambling about how every woman is conspiring against him. It's like, oh, bro, oh man,
Man.
just maybe slow down. Like, have a glass of water and we'll talk. But then and then they're like, and then when I think it's Lupa who says it, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, shh, just stop.
It's gonna be okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we should talk about like what is that scene, right? Because it's fairly expansive.
There's a lot going on. Mostly because there's just a lot going on in the club, for one.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is like textural. Like it's not necessarily plot relevant, but it's like, you're descending through these like you go into the club and they discover it's kind of a microcosm of the city. It's this funnel shaped thing that it's all tiers down. And
That is how Dante's Inferno is shaped. So, I mean...
Yeah, just like Citadel is the sand pit on which it's all built down towards the center.
Yeah, and I mean, their guide is named Charon.
Yep, yeah, totally subtle. Definitely not Sharon the boatman. 100% different character. Although, also, he's definitely not a satyr.
Yeah. Though he does he is kind of set apart in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, So here, this is my fault that I didn't look up Sharon's particular, like, mythological backstory, because I don't know whether he stands apart particularly from that myth, like from the hell bureaucracy, so to speak. Because it seems like that in this case when they go in and Lupa and Sai are kind of like at least at first looking around and being like, "Dang, there's a lot of sex happening right now," and they kind of can't handle it, and he approaches. So it seems like he's kind of floating above it a little bit, but at the same time, the description of him as this little sweaty kind of goat man. It's just like, oh yeah, nope, definitely a devil. Cool. Hey there, satyr. So that was I thought that was kind of interesting, and especially he is like a representation of a kind of safety there as well, because he's the first aid guy. He's got the little the belt, and I think that's the only thing he's wearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's wearing his medical fanny pack that covers his junk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I was interested by Sai's kind of initial reaction, because it felt like, since obviously it was his idea to go to Dante's Inferno, and given his kind of prior behavior, it seems like this is something that he'd be into, but then he's immediately not into it.
Yeah, I mean, his general goal was to convince Lupa to sleep with him. Right.
But it seemed like as soon as the prospect of, well, I guess the emphasis was with him and not just with someone, even though he thought well, maybe if there's sex in the room, she'll do it with me. But it turns out not necessarily.
Yeah.
So what did you think was the significance of that?
I think Lupa's actions were kind of a little bit foreshadowy, as we will come to learn later.
Yeah. Now that I think about it that way, because I mean, she seems pretty comfortable.
Yeah, she's
the whole time.
Fairly comfortable.
She's like, "This is, how are you doing, Sai? Are you okay? You seem uncomfortable." But she's she's fine.
Yeah, and she's interested in Sai enough where she she was touching him and stuff, touching his stomach and all that, being like, "Hey, are you into this right now? Yes, no, maybe." And then he kind of ignores her, and she's like, "Well, damn." Guess
he
not.
kind of spaces out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I certainly thought this was the kind of slap in the face where he realized, oh wait, I actually I'm more emotionally invested in this woman than I thought I was.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, it was kind of a stripping of his innocence, though, right? Where he was like, this is no longer about love, this is about sex, and I don't like it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he changed. Exactly. He thought it was one thing, and then it's actually not that. It's something else entirely.
Yeah.
Well, but it's more. He sees the difference between their two perspectives and is kind of taken aback by it, I thought. And so he kind of cracks and goes bolting down.
Deeper and deeper.
Yeah. Screaming his head off and basically flailing his arms and running down the spiral that is...
knocking over people, messing with stuff.
Yeah, until he reaches the very... well, maybe not quite the
not
very
the very
bottom.
bottom. He enters a room. He escapes. He finds an escape.
Yeah.
He's in the... I think he actually ends up in the second to last level, the 8th level.
I think that's... Yeah.
he like you said, he bolts into a room to kind of get away from it, or so he thinks, and finds a woman in there. Sorry, Brendan, it sounded like you had it.
Oh, I was just looking at the 9 circles.
Oh yeah,
with 8 being fraud. So if it's the second to last level, that makes sense.
Well, so yeah, 8 and 9, or sorry, 7 and 8. No, anyway, the 2 last ones are the two different types of fraud. It's unintentional fraud and intentional fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So 8 is fraud, and then 9 is betrayal or treachery.
Right.
Yeah.
So I thought so when he goes into that room in I'm pretty sure it was the second to last level. He goes in and he finds this woman in there who kind of tells him everything he wants to hear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who he immediately has kind of a romance with too. So he's suddenly comfortable again because he's having like this innocent exchange with this woman.
Well, the way that the book put it, and it was something that does come back up that I was kind of fascinated by, was the idea of him looking for magic.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In a relationship. He wants it to be this sort of pure thing that like you find and it's perfect and always great and like all this stuff, these lofty romantic ideals.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the rest of the club is directly contradicting that. Of this sort of idea of, no, it's about all these other things. Mm-hmm. All these other things. Sex, pleasure, whatever, right? Like, these other things that are not part of the romantic ideal.
Well, I felt like he was conflating lust with love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I think definitely. I think that was his kind of problem all along, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. You go back to the very first woman in the very beginning of the book, and he's laying in bed after he's found this lady on the streets who ends up being a whore, and he's imagining that he's going to marry her and they're going to have children. And it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he's contracted the clap so hard he's got a round of applause. He's definitely got like poor judgment in this department, and that's established so many times. And actually, really, that's like kind of his thing, is that he just does shit because he's looking for some short-term reward. And this is really where he gets burned by it. This is kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back as far as his constant, like screwing himself over, really. Mm-hmm. Because as soon as he comes out of that, like she gives him that spiel about like how he's different and like this is a romantic thing, and then he gets booted out and he's like, I'm gonna come back tomorrow. And then immediately Sharon comes back and he's like, hey man, how do you like the show in there? Right? And he's like, what do you mean?
Yeah, and Sharon's like, no, these are totally paid for by the management in order to get people to come back.
Yep.
Well, and he points right next to the door and he's like, well, see there where it says it's sponsored by like Bell?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Sai has his total sexist breakdown and just like anything that's ever happened to him, he starts attributing to like the closest female human, just randomly lashing out.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's where he starts experiencing betrayal and goes down into the 9th pit where he finds Sam Laszlo in the middle of this crazy orgy, like sexing up Vita.
Which again, Ron Perlman. Just that's your visual there.
Whoa.
He's my ideal.
Holy crap! Oh, he's perfect, but
he's
like,
perfect, but yeah, there you go.
I don't need to see that. Hellboy does not need to.
Yes.
I just want to point out that
That red butt does not need to appear on screen.
at the end of the last episode, I mentioned that I thought that Zalazo was going to be a great betrayer.
Mm-hmm.
I did specifically
Shocking.
say he was going to be a Judas Iscariot, which he was not, but I did consider him to be a great betrayer. And then immediately in the first chapter here, we see he's in the great betrayer pit.
Yeah.
He's literally standing in a pool of water, just like Satan at the bottom of hell.
Yep.
So that was the kind of right after the last episode that we did, and I started reading that. I'm like, oh, I was right. He is Satan. And it turns out I wasn't 100% right.
No.
You were close.
But that scene was like, I'm vindicated. Everything was right. Because he's totally in that role. So he's down there. He's screwing Vita pretty gymnastically, and Saul loses his shit and books it.
I'm pretty sure the author stole that scene out of a hentai anime.
I think
Because it seems like it.
back in the 70s, 80s, I don't know.
I mean, there's plenty of literature out there that he could have stolen that from. Just saying.
True.
So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. He.
Oh, you know what we missed? Does this happen? So maybe this is the next thing that happens. Is that Lupa and Kassler are seen in public together?
That happens at the beginning. It's part of them
Okay.
waiting in line, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's super important.
Right.
Because her ex-husband
Theo.
sees them together, and that sets him off on his role, which I just want to point out, if you paid attention to where his house was placed and the strip, it's in Fraud.
Yeah, it's in the 8th circle.
In the 8th circle. Yep, yeah. And so that's where he lives, and so we finally, I think it mentions a little bit of what he does to customer service agents in the first half of the book, but in the second half, you really get to see just how savage he gets to be.
Yeah. It's very interesting because this is one of those things that would never happen today because of computers and the way we record keep now and all that stuff. It just would not be possible.
Or at least it'd be a little harder. You could do it. I mean, oh shit.
We're getting rated.
We're getting rated. Yeah. Damn. Hello, everybody. We're reading a book about Satan. Hail Satan.
666.
Yeah. So hey guys. Yeah. So that scene, I was just looking at my notes here, where they get seen, where Slick sees them outside, is actually at the beginning of the next part, at the beginning of part 6.
Yeah.
I think. Right? Or am I looking at that wrong? Where is it? But yeah, so that's, you're talking about the scene where he's walking his dog, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And his poor dog. Because he tells. Oh, who does the dog attack again? Is it?
He wants him to attack Sai, but instead it attacks, I believe, some random bystander.
Yeah. And then the
cop
cop
gets shot by the cop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, unfortunate. Poor choice of actions.
Yeah.
But, that, again, a classic example of everyone, making their decisions based on what they think is correct, and it being totally wrong.
Yep.
Because it's all about, or I felt like a lot of the second half was about people who've established this way of thinking, this chain of thought that they believe things to be right, and then like that just continuously leads them on these diverging paths outwards. And like their view of what is real and what is a justified action, or man, what are they? What's an extenuating circumstance? I guess is one of the chapter headings, and you see how far each of them is willing to take that. I thought, and this was, and that scene, yeah, was the beginning of where this like kind of finally goes insane, and like Brennan said, and starts like really trying to destroy Kastler's life in an aggressive way.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's not as impossible as you say it is now, because like it would be harder, but I've taken calls at work where it's like I just accept that the person on the other end is who they say they are, because I mean there's just like certain information that maybe they have that you just got to assume that only they could have it. So if he was able to bluff well enough, I think you could still pull that off.
Yeah.
I don't think it'd be impossible anyway.
No. I just meant like things like some of the stuff that he makes happen.
Oh, all the bank stuff is impossible, but
yeah, and I think some of the
now
the medical stuff as well, with the medical records and all that stuff, with the police investigations and things, where he pretends to be cops.
True. Yeah, that would be difficult. You'd have to.
I don't think it'd be impossible. It'd just be different.
Not relevant. Yeah. This is a totally real environment where you live in a weird like hell analogy in New Jersey. So we gotta have New Jersey, I think, is the joke, but yeah. So you gotta have some suspension of disbelief.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. So, next thing, and that's this is all kind of interspersed with Sai's horrifying divorce from Vita.
Yeah.
Yes. Which just keeps things keep getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, and like we open on one Christmas, one of Kastler's Christmases, with his kids.
Scenes are so realistic. I feel like the way kids act so illogically, and they don't. They're like they have the way they want to act, and they've made their decisions. But he's like, no, but I'm rationalizing with you right now. Like this is how it should be. And he's like, but then the kids throw a fit, and it's just like heartbreaking.
Yeah, and then he gets mad, and then they freak out even more, and it just like spirals. Mm-hmm. Like every bad Christmas party that anyone's ever been to with young children, like it's so real. It's the scariest real. Yeah, and then but like also his evaluation a little bit later, which is like I only have 5 hours, and it takes like 3.5 to get them settled down, and then by that point we're already done, and we gotta start packing up and head home. And so he decides maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe it's better for the kids if I just like kind of pack it up and say live with your mother until we sort this custody thing out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, the custody thing.
Oh,
it's horrifying, right?
It's ridiculous. Like
it's pretty savage.
It's like, oh yeah, we have to wait a year to file this paperwork so that we can wait another year to file the next set of paperwork, so we can wait another year to have a hearing so that we can have a trial a year from then.
Again, way too real.
Yep.
In Canada, as in the United States, family court is jammed up, and that shit does not move at any kind of speed. So yeah, like that is, it's not that bad today, maybe.
Well, I feel like the initial decision wouldn't have been so ridiculous today, which would have made that whole process a little bit easier overall.
But like everything that happens, that is kind of like the exaggerated worst possible scenario.
Yeah.
So, but oh man, yeah. So he gets denied. Like he only has a couple hours a month at this point, I think, that he's allowed to see his children, and then not too long after Kassler discovers that Zalazzo and Vita are basically living together at that point, actually, it is a little bit later than that he discovers that they're moving west out to, I think he says, Arizona.
Yeah. It's not good for her.
Yeah, exactly. The dry heat is going to be definitely good for everyone. Everyone's health will improve. Somehow you got to descend deeper into the heat, and actually, that's a thing I felt like at that first part of this half that we were reading was there was kind of an ongoing metaphor of the weather in Citadel getting hotter and hotter as this nightmare scenario gets worse and worse, and Kassler's life kind of breaks down. So not only is he descending like psychologically through hell, but like physically now as he's approaching this source of heat. And I guess sin as well, because we're in hell, so that's where it all comes from. So what happened after that? We were
right after is session 5. Sorry, session 4.
Session 4, yeah.
Yeah. Where Kassler informs him that he's taking a vacation.
Oh, yeah, he takes the 5-month vacation.
Oh, yeah.
See ya!
This is too much, my man.
But as we learn later, he actually had pre-negotiated this. Like, he'd said this was what he was going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Satan still acts, like, pissed about it.
Yeah, he gets really, really pissy.
Yeah, he's like, well, but cure me, though. Like, this is just how it works, right? We're going to do 7 and I'll be good. So the faster we get it done, the faster I'm going to be cured. Right? Like, it's some factory process, which I thought was another one of, like, the great observations about any kind of, like, mental health treatment is just like, well, give me the pill and I'll be... it's going to be solved, like it's cold. Right? Do you have opinions on that? Because that sure seemed like what Satan's opinion was to me.
I think his perspective on it is really weird. Especially when you get towards the last couple of sessions where he's just like, oh, this is a thing I kind of just wanted to try and see what it was like. It's kind of interesting. I kind of like it. That sort of thing. My whole problem with all of those, or I guess not problem, but the thing that I kept feeling when, and I know this was intentional, when you read those sessions, like, it's so hard to take Satan at face value for anything he says. Yeah. And I know it's intentionally that way, where it's like, it's not even his, like, the whole idea of it's like, it's not his fault that people keep associating with this stuff. It's just the way that he comes across just forces an interpretation. And it's really, really sleazy and weird.
Well, he even keeps saying, like, it's just like bad rumors basically made up about him that have nothing to do with how he actually operates, even though we see him do he's constantly deceiving people, and like he's even real shitty to that kid in the very first scene, like so he talks a big game to Kassler, but then like his actions don't bear that out. I thought he's incredibly manipulative.
I was gonna say, I think in a sense he's telling the truth because he doesn't really lie, but he uses the truth as a weapon to create outcomes. Yeah. Because it's not that he's keeping things from you; it's that he's waiting for the right moment to reveal that thing to you, so that you'll do something differently than what you were already doing.
Yeah, he's always steering.
Yeah. Yes, that's accurate. Steering. Good way to describe it.
Yeah, so... Yeah, and like each of the sessions that he has, it's hard to tell who's therapizing who. You know, because it's very obvious there's a motive on both sides. Kassler's looking for one thing, and Satan is pushing for something else, because but like it's also not clear, at least to me, or wasn't clear when I was reading it, that happened even though they put the dates, I guess that it happens like dramatically later.
Yeah.
Like the causality of how their decision making happens is, I felt like, intentionally a little obfuscated. But yeah, it's like there's a push and pull between them in an interesting way that I kind of didn't expect from an entity that claims to be Satan. Like, he's very needy.
Yes. Yeah.
But then
Yeah,
again, that
obfuscated is
neediness is kind of the
favorite
whole
word.
thing, right?
Right.
Well,
yeah. And
just in that
we
session too. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. He starts talking about. Man, I wrote it down. What was his word? He's. Oh man. Oh yeah. Like, he's talking about all love is based on the foundation on a foundation of hate. Like, it's just hate against outsiders or non-believers, and that love is just a way to eliminate the differences inside a group. So it becomes like an us versus them kind of scenario, which is, of course, classic for him, because, you know, who else sets one against another? Mm-hmm. Like, it's this whole gig.
Right.
But he also says, I think he says, Satan is the god of this world, which comes back to the ultimate message, I guess, of what it all is, which I will talk about maybe a little bit later.
Yeah.
Because as we know, Satan promised an ultimate truth to Kassler in exchange for the 7 therapy sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's not. What he revealed was not quite what I expected.
Yeah, it wasn't what I expected either, though at the same time, like, it kind of made a lot of sense in the whole grand scheme and what he's been implying over the course of this whole thing. But yeah, it wasn't quite what I expected either.
That's usually how I feel at the end. The first time the first time around I felt kind of like dissatisfied, but satisfied. I was like, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense, but it's not what you're expecting. And then every time I read it again, I'm like, I just feel like there could have been something else. It's like,
well, so
at the same time, like, any sort of weird, like, really highbrow philosophical argument would have just felt disingenuous.
True,
yeah,
especially with the way everything plays out.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what makes that ending effective in a sense, is that the fact that, like, no, we're just overthinking everything all the time. It's just not that complicated.
Yeah, and it was kind of neat, because I went into this half thinking, like, trying to figure out what my problem with the book was, because, like, it just wasn't catching me, and it was because I couldn't figure out what the question the book was asking is. But then that's, like, explicitly made clear at the end of this section, like, because Satan says he's revealing the great answer, and I think it's Sai who says, but I don't even know what the question was. And as soon as I read that, I'm like, shit, you know what I'm thinking, is that you haven't presented what the actual question is, and you've been setting up all this stuff. And of course I liked the mechanic of how it plays out in the very, very last line. But I thought it was interesting that I was kind of clearly manipulated to come to that point where it's like, but what are you asking? What are you actually saying? Like, I can tell you're saying something, but you haven't told me what you think you're saying yet. And then finally that comes out in as much as, like, I guess almost the answer to life, the universe, and everything being 42 is like, well, we know the answer, but what's the question?
Yeah.
But done in a much darker way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, like, I mean, one of the many questions, I guess, is, like, not necessarily the main theme of the book, but, like, who is Cy Kassler, and, like, what does he actually want? And we said that, like, he doesn't know that because certainly he gets involved with Vita, he gets involved with Lupa, and he gets involved with Bernie.
Oh, yeah.
Which was interesting.
Yeah. So I thought the way that plays out was also way too real.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It was very odd. And then his reaction to all of that later was even stranger to me.
Well, so okay, hold on. Let me refer to my notes here. Where does that first start?
It starts when his house burns down, right?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which
no, it's before that though. Actually.
Oh, you're right.
Doesn't
It
he
is.
proposition him first and then he goes?
yeah.
You're right.
Because they go to like lunch. Oh man, where the heck? I didn't write down where they were.
Weren't they just at work? Weren't they meeting at lunch? Or did they actually
yeah,
go?
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah, they were in like the cafeteria. And yeah, so and they're both talking and Kassler is talking to what's his Bernie Cole? Is that his last name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kohler.
Kohler. Yeah. And like he's describing how like he's been burned like in every relationship he's ever been in, and Bernie's just like, well, yeah, man, like women don't understand what men want. Like only men would know that because obviously I'm a dude, so I know what you want. So like, why don't we hang out? Like we seem to get along all like really great, and like and Kassler's like, I mean, okay. And then when they end up in what I can't even remember what the scenario is. They go to dinner, I think, like outside of work, and Bernie is like really, really aggressively trying to get him to be his boyfriend.
Bernie makes him dinner at his apartment.
Right, because he's a big he's in that very early wave of like the celebrity chef kind of thing is what he's into. They mentioned specifically that he's into nouvelle cuisine, which in their mid 80s would have been like real hot, early to mid 80s. So so he gives him the whole spiel, and like Kassler kind of is like, well, I'm not gay, but you're like my best friend, so like maybe we'll continue doing that. And Bernie just like is not interested in only being friends. He will not be friend zoned no matter what happens.
He wants Kassler.
Oh, he wants him real bad.
So bad.
And it's kind of this tragic, unrequited affection, like and I feel like even Kassler is aware of that.
Yep.
And like he feels bad that he can't play this part that Bernie really wants.
Well, it's one of those things. Like Bernie is his like best friend, and he cares about him as a person. Like he doesn't, he cares.
Yeah, he doesn't want to hurt him, but at the same time, he's not into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just felt like this happens plenty in real life, whether it's gay or straight or whatever. Like, just that kind of being really into someone and them not returning it is, and I thought it was really super real.
Especially the way Kassler kind of continues to lead him on, in the sense that he keeps giving Bernie all these opportunities to really, really deeply read into it.
Yeah. And it's only because it feels like he doesn't want to hurt his feelings. Like he's trying to be like, well, I'm not going to totally crush this guy, but then he can't. You're right. He leads him on because he keeps not telling him no, but he doesn't tell him yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I mean, in the same sense, like not saying no is.
But they're also coworkers, right? So he can't totally sabotage this thing because he's got to work with this guy every day. Mm-hmm. So like he's in this kind of where you eat scenario, but like he can't help it.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind is this is taking place in the 70s.
Yeah.
And views on homosexuality in the 70s were very different from they are today. So for us, we're like, yeah, okay, whatever. But at the same time, like that would have taken a lot more courage and a bunch of other stuff than it for Bernie, society-wise, to take that leap.
But in the to counter that slightly, it took a lot more for, or at least as much, I guess, for Sai to not be like, "Whoa, man, this is not okay at all." Like he just takes it in stride.
Right.
So I feel
he does, and he actually mentions offhand that like he's not really cool with homosexuality at all.
Yeah, he doesn't want it. He's not into it. As he repeatedly says, "I'm not homosexual." In court, under oath, wherever he needs to.
Yeah.
The definition by that lawyer was a little problematic to me.
Oh,
that whole interview was crazy.
Man.
Yeah, I love the like, "Oh, excuse me, don't explain your answers. Yes or no answers only, please.
Right.
Please, only the least context."
Well, I mean, he had such a shit lawyer, too. That Marty guy.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
He's just the worst. Although, he reveals at one point that it's like, yeah, he sucks, but at the same time, like, had Kassler followed his advice to try and seek custody, he would have ended up, even in a worst-case scenario, would have ended up better than he was where he started, because he didn't request custody. He says, always ask for more than you want. Which he doesn't, and which Sai never does.
Yeah.
Well, Sai rarely asks for what he wants.
Actually, yeah, and that's a big part of that trial.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a huge part of that trial, where the his wife's lawyer is just like, "Well, did you tell her you didn't like it?" And he's like, "Well, no."
Yep.
And he's just like, "Well, how was she supposed to know?" And he's like, "Pretty sure she knew."
Yeah, and he's like, "But did you ever say the words, like, out loud?" Well, no. Which, yeah, and that whole thing was really, I felt like that was kind of the flashback to each incident in his life where he didn't maybe actively make it worse, but his silence, actually, it's a legal Latin term, oh no. Anyway, silence gives consent. Like, he doesn't say anything, so it kind of all goes along assuming that he was okay with it. And like, if he had taken action and he had more kind of a will to apply his will, I guess, to the situation, it would have turned out very differently. But he's constantly giving people the benefit of the doubt and letting them kind of roll over him in a way that's really, really tragic.
I mean, in a certain sense, Satan's doing the same thing to him.
Oh yeah, no, Satan's the one rolling him. Like,
yeah,
he's got Sai covered in egg and he's rolling him through the batter. Like, this shit is real bad. He's gonna fry him up.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's actually so that's something that's interesting in that through at least the sessions that I read. One of the things, or like maybe the most important thing that Satan, one of his biggest problems is that people get to do whatever they want and he doesn't.
Yeah.
Even though Sai almost never does or gets what he wants. And I think that's something that's one of the reasons he selects Sai as his therapist, because he relates to him.
I was going to say, I think that gives them a sense of camaraderie, or it gives Satan a sense of camaraderie with Sai. Sai doesn't really get that.
No.
But Satan does.
Doesn't have a lot of, yeah. Kassler doesn't have a lot of personal insight, was my opinion. Like, there's a limited emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was kind of interested by the fact that Satan could, like, that he'd relate to anybody, I guess. But I don't know. Did you, Brendan, have any thoughts on what, like, the way he interacted with Kassler as almost more of a, just as like a buddy, someone he can be like, "Hey man, look, we've both been screwed over. Like, we're not so different, you and I," kind of scenario.
Yeah,
We're not so different.
I think he says that
Right.
like explicitly a bunch of times,
He does.
where he's just like, "We're not that different, man," and Kassler's like, "Hell no."
Yeah, he gets
Pun
really
intended.
I think he does say that, doesn't he?
Oh yeah. Castler uses hell a lot
Yep.
in his language when he's swearing, and I think it's really ironic, yeah, because it comes back in that kind of stuff. Yeah, after like at the kind of the part where we're getting to, Sai and Satan start relating to each other very differently. From the earlier ones, because it becomes a little bit less buddy.
Oh yeah.
Because Sai goes on that 5-month vacation and he comes back and he's like, "Hey, I've been basically sitting on a mountain reflecting on life for 5 months. Let's talk." And so they get into a lot more religious and cultural ideologies of what Satan is for the next 2 sessions.
Yeah.
Where Satan starts relating his personal history of like how he was created, how people were related to him throughout history, and all
that was really,
stuff.
really interesting.
Yeah.
Because he talks about his mother and father earlier on, and you get this more concrete feeling, but then when he actually starts talking about it, it's a very, like kind of abstract, conceptual thing where he's not immersed. It's more like well, I guess this is clearly intentional now that I think about it, but it's more like the origin story of like the Greek gods, where they come from sort of the confluence of chaos versus order as these personified forces. And oh man, where I wrote it down, he was his mother was inspiration and his father was fear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was a really interesting kind of commentary on motivations for anything anyone does.
Yeah.
Because certainly in the description of when he came about, that like proto-human living in the woods and like lightning strikes, camp burns down, he thinks everyone he loves is dead, and he curses the gods for fucking him up.
Yeah.
And Satan is like, and that's when I was born. The second that someone tried to blame someone other than themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, so I thought that concept of Satan and God as being like a place for people to externalize their feelings and them existing to capitalize on that was interesting.
Yeah, so you missed the previous session 6, which was basically Satan relating to Kastler, basically where people wrote about him and how he was that was his development from a small tiny idea in the back of that barbarian's head into this global idea of what is evil, where he's got like one mention in the Old Testament sort of thing. And then he's written about a bunch in this other book, and then in the New Testament he gets this sort of development, and then they kind of get to that point, and then Dante's Inferno is written, yada yada yada, and then there's nothing for the next 2,000 years because our idea of him has not really changed in 2,000 years.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, and that meshes well with with Sai's conclusion that what's wrong with Satan is that he wants to be an author. That's why he was kicked out of heaven, because he wants to tell his own story.
Yeah, and part of what he keeps bringing up in that section about the histories is like, man, I suggested all these edits. It could have been way shorter. Like, there's all this stuff that wasn't said properly.
Okay, yeah, I see, because I was missing that big chunk, I didn't see that. But, like, that's reinforced, like, repeatedly through the end of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Yeah, and especially his mention at the very end of the sequel to his book, which is Satan's Editor.
Yeah.
Perfect. But yeah, so the idea, I thought that was interesting. The idea of him, of like that existence being defined by the story you tell of that existence.
Yeah.
Because that's actually kind of something that comes up in a lot of media right now, especially in cognitive science and neuroscience. Like a lot of sci-fi stuff deals with that. Mm-hmm. If you watch Westworld, spoiler alert, one of the things they say is that our consciousness is the story we tell ourselves.
Ooh.
And that is a recurring theme in a lot of things. If you watch Altered Carbon as well, which I mean, the show is not great, but they kind of at least maintain this theme through it. And the book is better, but they talk about how the feelings you feel within your body and your chemistry that makes you feel a certain way defines the story that you tell yourself. And so your actions that come from your reflection upon that story become different. So, there's a metatextuality between who you think you are and who you are, and how those two things kind of are mirrors facing each other. And this is very much, I thought, what Satan and Kassler, Satan even maybe in Zalazo.
I was going to say Zalazo shares a lot of that perspective of like...
it's those, they're the mirrors, and Kassler is the figure in between, seeing his reflection being kind of bounced back at itself constantly, and he can't deal with the fact that there's this bottomless pit of potential motivations and everything else, because he has to finally make a real decision.
Yeah.
Although at the end he eventually does.
Yeah.
He breaks out of that cycle of
he stopped
spiraling.
He stops listening to the voice in his head, the temptation and the fear, and just goes and does stuff.
Well, yeah, so maybe, is it that he stops listening to fear and starts listening to inspiration instead?
Oh.
Maybe. That's the plan. Whether or not he does that, who knows? But
yeah, and that's certainly, that's, I guess that's where it kind of ends, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
well,
I don't know.
A couple of things we should bring up here. One, Zelazno's identity.
Oh yeah, well we have to.
We have to talk about the scene where
let's reel it back in a little bit.
Yeah. So I was waiting for this because we missed so many juicy bits of the book that I just absolutely love. So wheeling all the way back to that first session that's in this section, I love the ending where he's like, "Why do you like me so much?" And he's like, "Basically, I just think you've got style." He's like, "What?" He's like, "I just like the way you killed your father."
Oh God, yeah.
And it's like, oh, which leads
that
right
line.
in. Yeah, which leads right into when Kassler goes to Sam's house to confront him.
Well, I mean, basically, anytime that Kassler goes to Sam's house, something weird
happens. But I love this part because this is when the book starts to get it starts stepping out of the realm of reality. Starts becoming. I mean, it kind of becomes more supernatural in Dante's Inferno, really a little bit, but it really steps out of it in when he goes over to Sam's house. Because he gets over there and he's like, "Hello, Sam, where are you?" And Sam's hunting naked outside in the forest.
He doesn't see that at first.
Yeah,
no. He just opens the door and goes in, and there's all these Renaissance paintings on the walls.
Yeah, he starts wandering his house.
And he's like, "Where did you get these paintings?" And there's no one there. And then he gets to the room with the big sheet glass window, and he sees naked Sam Zalazo running through the woods outside. Yeah.
Or Ron Perlman. Yep.
And he sees Ron Perlman run by and murder a small animal.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't even murder him. He takes his eyes out and just lets it go.
Yeah, he doesn't kill it. He just maims it.
Blinds it.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, job well done." And then he's like, "What are you doing here?"
Still naked, covered in blood.
Yep.
Hey man, you like my paintings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Sai turns, and I think it's at that point that he sees the painting of himself and his own father.
Oh, Zelazno brings him into another room that only has that painting.
Right. No,
it's this dark room with a single spotlight on this one painting. It's this is a Da Vinci painting I picked up when I was in Italy. It looks pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah.
And so that I didn't realize at the time was total foreshadowing.
Oh yeah.
To Zelazno's eventual horrible thing in the bottom of Phlegethon.
The thing.
Yeah, but not to get too ahead of ourselves. Yeah.
Bernie ends up mentioning that Sam has on multiple occasions made these spooky ass paintings to torture all the people with like a bee. Did they do one for him? Did Bernie ever admit to having one for him? I can't remember.
I think he painted him a Rembrandt of some sort.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So Sam,
because he copies these Renaissance paintings and he does like 3 an hour or something on a good day.
Oh yeah.
Which is like, what?
He's painting Rembrandt paintings in 15 minutes.
He also doesn't sleep anymore.
Right, no, he's better than that now.
He micro naps every time he blinks.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he hasn't slept in ages. Because apparently the brain chemistry, once you get past like 3 days of no sleep, that happens. Yeah. Which I've never heard, and I know people who have done that.
His like Castler get on my level.
Yeah, it's basically, yeah.
Oh, and yeah, so like one of the other things that that Castler sees when he goes into the house just before he encounters or before he sees him running naked outside is he sees the chess game in progress on the table and black has won. It has just taken the king of the white side.
Yep.
So like it's very, very deeply symbolic. Obviously, he's venturing into this underworld where the definitely not Satan man is there doing like having this spooky chess game against no one with the crazy paintings, and it's like all super metaphorical. Yep. And like you get the and then there's that foreshadowing to Sai's father, or like foreshadowing, but a reference back to the past. And what was their next encounter after that? Was it Christmas? I think it's Christmas.
Yeah, and that's kind of tied into Bernie, right?
Right, yeah. But the thing from that one that I certainly most remember is Zalazzo's Christmas tree. That's all... They describe it as a huge fir tree with glitter-covered pill bottles and ECG leads hanging off of it.
Yeah, and there's like dyed burlap straps from straitjackets and stuff hanging as streamers.
Burlap straps, and they have fold-out angels cut from Rorschach tests.
Isn't that at Fledgathon though?
It is.
Aren't the patients are decorating the tree?
Yeah, but it's like he put it there.
Yeah.
It's his tree. Because it's all in when Castler's pursuing him, Zalazzo. I mean, so I thought, it was very portentous.
And then Leo.
Yeah, so Leo.
Oh right,
does not have a good time.
No.
No, Leo diverts into alcoholism after his wife leaves him and drinks himself to death.
Literally.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not quite literally.
Well, not quite.
Everything but.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
This is after he burns down Castler's apartment.
Yep.
And after he plants like a ridiculous amount of explosives in front of Satan's computer.
Around, in front of...
Well, at one point they says there's a 14-inch wall of explosives, so you can't even see the machine. It's just like explosives.
It's like this Katamari of bombs basically around.
I just picture like one of those ridiculous Roadrunner cartoons where you just see all the sticks of dynamite like just piled up.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's like a manhole cover, and Yosemite Sam is like stomping another thing down into it, popping up in the other one.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, it's that level of dynamite. And
I think there's like C4 and a bunch of stuff there too.
It's everything.
It was like everything he can get his hands on.
So he's about to blow that thing up, but then he gets super sick and he goes to the hospital and he's like all bloated and like filled with fluid, and so Lupa and Castler both go to see him on his deathbed, more or less, as far as they're aware.
Yeah.
And Lupa is savage as hell, basically.
Yep. he's like, I'm sorry for all the things I did to you, and she's like, yeah, whatever, man.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't care.
I are sorry.
I don't forgive you.
Yeah.
He's like, that's fair. Okay.
No, well, he like kind of doesn't get it because he's like, well, do you forgive me? And she's like, nah. And he's like, well, but what if I did this stuff? And he's like, and she's just like, yeah, but what if you died though? Like, wouldn't that be better for everyone?
Yeah, yeah.
And then so she leaves, and well, yeah. And this is also after kind of Lupa and Sai have that moment in the lobby where they're both like, "Oh man, he's finally dead, and we can be together."
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is after Lupa's career things and the whole, like, she misses him and he misses her because it was kind of the only real normal relationship they've had in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Either of them.
Mm-hmm.
So all that. But yeah, so, and then, but then Leo tells Lupa the story about why him and Sam Zalazno are enemies.
Oh, right. Oh, that crazy story.
That sounds like an old folktale to me.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I didn't look it up.
I didn't
which
either. I should have.
But it felt like a Cain and Abel kind of scenario.
Yeah.
Which I don't think was an accident.
No.
But like, yeah, so they're engaged to twins, and then somehow.
So they're. I don't know if they're twins.
Like,
they're sisters, right? Are they twins?
Sisters. Sorry,
Yeah,
it's just
two sisters. And they're having a joint wedding, and they have the.
Mm-hmm.
This is Romanian, so they have like these big veils to cover the face, so you can't actually see who's who. And Leo switches brides on Sam Zalazno, so they marry the other. He marries the other sister, who he thinks is prettier.
Yep.
Yeah, because at the last minute he decides he'd rather have the other sister.
Yeah. And then this whole tragic thing happens where Zalazno's really mad, but he ends up falling in love with the other sister anyway, who is dramatically in love with him, but commits suicide because she thinks he hates her.
Yeah, and then that suicide causes the other sister to commit suicide because now she knows what's happened and doesn't want and so everyone's dead.
Everyone's dead.
Everyone dies except for Sam and Leo, who.
Yeah. Well, there's some contention that Leo might have talked the bride into suicide.
Yeah. And he's just like, well, I don't know, man. Like, it couldn't have been that bad. Whatever. Right?
And Lupa's just like, what the fuck? Walks out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
That's exactly why you need to die.
Yep. And then Sai goes in and basically gives him the same treatment. And is like, well, what if I see that you might die if I turn this knob here. He waits for him to fall asleep and turns the knob so that he fills up with fluid. Or he waits for him to be about to die, he thinks.
Well, and that's after...
That's after he gives him the 20 grand.
Gives him 20 grand and
Right.
the house.
And tells him what he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gives him the full confession. He gives him all the money and the property. Which is a pretty
And
good
I
deal.
ruined your life. So here you can have these things on my deathbed. And he's so pissed when he finds out that when he's talking to the nurse who's fiddling with something but doesn't really know what she's doing, and he's like, hey, what does that thing do? And she's like, oh, well, I just wanted to check that I had it on the right switch because if it's the other way, the tube will fill up and essentially will kill him. And he was like, oh, okay. And she leaves and he's like,
Oh, I like the whole... Yeah, I needed to make sure this thing because I'm not going to come back to check on him for 2 hours.
yeah.
Here you go.
You gotta plug in the other way.
Here you go. Here's your opportunity to kill him. I've told
Yeah,
you I'm
for
not
sure,
coming
don't murder him.
back.
Yep.
Don't do a murder.
Don't do a murder now.
But then he does.
Yeah. And
He's-
somebody
yeah.
sees him.
Curious George of murder. Yeah, and of course, as always, Lazo is there watching in the background, observing.
Well, he doesn't
not saying
sleep,
anything.
so...
He's got to keep himself busy somehow.
I mean, he was was also around because he'd spoken to Leo before Lupa and Castler, so because they had to have their little tiff.
Yeah, they fight. Well, they fight and fuck, and then it's basically all one scenario. I mean, that happens a little bit earlier, but not much.
Yeah.
Which I thought was hilarious, because as soon as they set out to break up, they get together, which I guess is intentional. But so Lazo sees Castler kill Leo, and knows and doesn't say anything.
No, because he's all using it as emotional blackmail for later.
Yep.
Yeah. And, I mean, like, he collects a lot of blackmail. Like, he collects the suicide letter from Bernie.
Yep.
Which is the next thing that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next thing well, and it's not quite the next thing, because I think it's Sai ends up marrying Lupa next.
Yep.
They get married.
Meanwhile... on the advice of his lawyer.
Yep.
Right, yes.
To make it look better.
For the court.
Or stable home for his children.
Yep.
Right?
And we don't quite know all of her backstory yet, of course.
Yeah, when does the lawyer start saying, we got this killer information about Vita?
That's later. That's just before the first court appearance.
Yeah.
Oh man. So that was a spectacular instance. And my note when that happened was, wait, did we know about this already? So that's my question: did we already know that Lupa was a prostitute?
Yes.
Yes, we find out like pretty much the night before, because she's like, "There's something I need to tell you."
Well, it's because of
she doesn't.
It's because of Bernie Kohler's suicide note.
Yes.
Christmas Eve, Kazler's got the kids because Vita, after trying like 8 different places to loaf the kids off, eventually gives them to Kastler in like a grand, magnanimous gesture. Yeah. So him and Lupa, they're married. They're have the kids. So Kastler forgets that he made, or doesn't forget, but doesn't go to a dinner engagement for Christmas Eve with Bernie. So Bernie calls after Kastler leaves to go help his patients on Christmas Eve. And Lupa answers the phone and says, "Yeah, this is Mrs. Kastler. We've been married like a week, yada, yada, yada." Bernie's like, "What the fuck?" Hangs up the phone.
No. Yeah, I liked his like, "Oh, it's Mrs. Kastler. You don't sound like Vita." No, the new Mrs. Kastler. So he knows that it's just happened.
Yeah. So Bernie, in a fit of rage and drama, decides that he's going to kill himself. And so he goes into the office, he starts writing this crazy letter.
But he decides he's going to make it look like he was going to kill himself. Also, I don't know about that. So he makes it look like he's going to kill himself. Or he wants that, but then like he kind of gets carried away.
Yeah.
And then accidentally kicks the chair out from under himself and dies.
Yeah.
There's an interesting interaction between Bernie and Sam.
Yeah.
Because like they're not taking patients in at this time because we've forgotten to mention that.
Bernie
has done all of this.
That's why Bernie was at the hospital, because he wanted to check himself in, because he was feeling suicidal. And wanted to be kept under watch, and the admissions guy's like, "I can't do it, man. No admissions. Let's talk about this. We're all about the talking cure here." And he's like, "Yes, I know. I work here, man. I'm your boss."
Yeah, exactly. So he says that, and the receptionist guy is just like, "Okay, sure, well, let's talk it out." And he's like, "Actually, I feel a lot better all of a sudden. Weird. I'm gonna go."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does he talk to Sam before he writes the note?
No, he writes the note, and then he meets up with Sam, because he was going to not do it.
Yeah.
but then he wanted to
writing it got it out.
Yeah, and then, he was feeling better and all that stuff, and, he was going to go home and be okay, but then he runs into Zelazno, and they have a confrontation where basically Zelazno, just being a huge dick about the entire thing. Mm-hmm. And it's he's being that, weird psychotherapist dick, of where he's like, oh, I can see you're suicidal. You shouldn't do that, man. And just in this weird I picture it with this really condescending tone of
but he doesn't quite say you shouldn't do it. He's well, maybe you should think about that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the point is that he tips Bernie back over the edge, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so Bernie goes
because he's not trying to bring him back. He's trying to push him over that edge, as we learn later.
Yeah. So then Bernie goes home. He tries to create this dramatic scene. So when Kasler finds the note, he runs over there. Yada yada yada. Mm-hmm. Doesn't quite happen like that.
Nope.
No, because this is right after Kasler sneaks out Mrs. Fletcher to go see her dying son.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Despite the court order after she ripped out that judge's throat.
Right. Which we totally.
There's just so many things that happen, and it's just a constant slide down, and everything that Sai tries to do that's good ruins him.
Yeah.
He sacrifices his career for this woman, and she still sabotages him. Everyone involved just burns him completely. Yeah. Except in the end, when all the and this is a part I missed, is somehow all those patients end up in his house. Yeah. After, because he's helped each of them try and, whether they admit it or not, he helps each of them try and resolve their problems. And they all end up in his house. I think he does something. He sneaks her out of the hospital. He
takes custody of he takes custody of them as their therapist, because he's their presiding doctor. So when they're allowed to be discharged, he can take custody of them and their cases from the hospital. So they do that. They come live with him because he's got this huge house that he doesn't use very much. Mm-hmm. And he cures them, basically.
Yeah, essentially. And I thought, again, I don't know how much we want to skip, but again, at the end, just to follow that thread, I thought it was interesting to see the Last Supper that he has with his patients. The very conspicuous Last Supper, where they all say their goodbyes, right? And they all well, I've got this job here, and now I can use this skill that you helped me turn my weakness into my strength. And so they achieve this kind of apotheosis in that scene.
Yeah.
But he's eating their sin and going down for it, because Sai, as I realized in that scene, Sai is very obviously a Jesus kind of analog in this story. He's married to a prostitute. I read my Dan Brown. They were married.
Yeah.
And so she Lupa is totally the Mary Magdalene, and I mean, I didn't line up the apostles, but I'm sure there's some congruence there between the different people that he cures and the 12 apostles. So I thought that played out in a totally different way than I anticipated at the beginning. And even though I knew that there was a lot of religious analogies, that just blew past me. That oh well, if there's a Satan, clearly there must be a Jesus. You need to have the other side of that mirror, as because that's the thing that keeps coming up, is that the mirroring characters, the good versus bad, the opponent versus the antagonist and protagonist, even in mythology. But and then what does he do right after that? What's his
so we'll swing back around to where we're going. So Bernie Kohler commits suicide by accident, because he's trying to create a dramatic scene and then ends up slipping on the chair and screwing up and accidentally killing himself, which then Kasler finds his body and calls the cop, cuts him down and calls the cops. He ends up wandering the streets till 7 a.m. while his kids and Lupa are back at home, and Lupa's all mad talking to Satan my husband's not my 1 week old husband isn't even here for Christmas Eve. I can't get laid. This sucks.
Yeah.
But he comes back and it's like, yeah, Bernie Kohler killed himself. And she's like, oh no. And then he's like, well, in the suicide note, he mentioned this thing. And she's like, oh shit, I guess I gotta tell you now. And it comes out that she was running a escort service, basically. Or was working as an escort because her business wasn't doing well. She was very high class and well paid. But she didn't like it anymore, so she quit. And everyone knew except Kasler, apparently.
Yep.
Yeah, which is strange because I feel like even as the reader, I had no idea.
I think they do that on purpose, though, because they want you in Kastler's perspective.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think when Vita breaks up with Kasler is in the point where right before the business goes under, and then when they break up and she's just been to Dante's Inferno and all that stuff and realizes some things.
And yeah, okay.
And then she's propositioned, and then she's like, well, maybe, and then things spiral out from there.
Interesting.
Because I legitimately think that it basically happens off camera. We just don't see it because it wasn't there for us to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that moment where she tells us is the first moment as the reader that you know about that.
Yeah. And Kasler's pissed.
Obviously, yeah. Needless to say, not.
Yeah, he takes it really hard. That's the last straw for him.
So then he contemplates his own suicide, but he's planning to get back at everybody. So he's like, I got all this stuff. I got to finish watching this show, Roots.
Yeah.
I'm not in a hurry. We'll take our time and do this properly.
He's too busy to kill himself right now. Yeah. Which I guess is a good place to be in a certain sense, but especially considering what ends up happening if you kill yourself in this town.
Yeah. Which I guess we'll go to now.
But I guess slightly before that, I'll say he doesn't kill himself because instead he goes and talks to the only person he has left to talk to, Satan. Who lives in his basement.
Hey, I'll trade you not. I'll trade you not killing yourself for psychotherapy sessions.
Yes.
Well, no, he says, I offer you the thing that will convince you not to kill yourself.
Yeah.
In exchange for that therapy.
Yeah. And he's like...
As always, he offers the truth.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
As a way to manipulate.
Yep.
And all he says is, just go down to the basement of Phlegethon, or what's left of Phlegethon, because it's been converted into apartments at this point, and see what Zalazzo's doing down in that basement. And then you decide.
Yep.
And so he does. And
that was a weird
and
scene.
remember, Zalazzo's all about that neuroscience, man.
I'm not gonna lie. As soon as he ran for that first body in the beginning of the book, I was like, mad scientist vibes, man. Mad scientist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was waiting for the Frankenstein down there.
Yeah.
It would just be like all the bodies sewn together into some horrible Leviathan.
Yep.
But it was way worse than that. It was just a bunch of brains in jars, essentially, in little plexiglass boxes with their eyes and ears still attached to them, so they can see and hear, but they can't do anything. Actually, I just realized it's a total I have no mouth and I must scream scenario. If you've ever read that Harlan Ellison short story, The Eternal Torture, you're in hell and you can see and hear, but you can't take action. You have no agency over your own life. And that's all the people who have died in the book. Every time they die, Zalazzo collects their body, sucks their brain out, and puts it in a jar, and then torments them forever in the basement of the hospital. Because he's Satan, and he just, he has these people frozen. Oh, and of course they talk about how cold it is down there, because he's got to keep their metabolism
Oh,
low.
yeah, you gotta freeze them.
Because it's that frozen lake deep down in the bottom of, at the bottom of hell.
Yep. I thought it was really interesting, because this was the only scene in the book where Zalazno kind of felt like an angelic figure.
Sort of.
Explain.
So here's the thing, and here's my thought process for this scene was, Satan is always presented as sort of like a very reasonable guy, and he's very down to earth and all this stuff, and he's always presenting himself as the good guy.
Mm-hmm.
So in this weirdly horrific scene, we have this very powerful figure who's always kind of been in the depths and the deepest, darkest places of this book, presented as evil. But in our perspective of, like, if Satan's the good guy, then what's the bad guy? Some sort of angel or, like, godlike figure, right?
Yeah.
Maybe even a Christ-like figure. And then he goes to dispose of the brains, and these chorus of angels, like, starts.
Oh God! Right.
Right. So he's opening up the gates of heaven to these brains in this weirdly.
No.
I didn't. No.
He's opening up the gates of hell.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
But
see
if they're
that.
already in hell,
He was.
Yeah.
Oh, that was like a
torments them to death.
painful, terrible.
right?
Screaming.
But it's presented as the opposite of all of the reasonable evil Satan stuff.
No, I thought
No.
it was a parallel to that.
Yes, I
You're
thought
descending
it was.
down. He's an angel of Satan, maybe. But like, yeah, he's has these people trapped, and he's slowly consuming them. Actually, just the best line in the book when Satan describes him, he consumes the pain of others. He's the edible complex.
The edible complex. But
Yeah.
Oh, that kills the man.
insert Price is Right sound here.
Yeah. Oh, it was solid, that pun. But yeah, so he's consuming these minds for his own satisfaction down in that basement.
He's gonna write a huge bunch of books on this phenomena that he's studied, so that he can be a crazy neuroscientist.
Well, and his justification is like, well, think about all the rats and pigs they've got in labs, and the Soviets are probably experimenting on people, so why shouldn't I do it? You gotta keep up.
Yep.
Oh man, yeah. So it's just eyes, and he watches as each one of them dies, and the light goes out of their eyes until finally, Salazzo pulls the sheet off the last one, and he's like, "Well, also I've got your dad,
who I've kept alive for 10 years as a brain."
Years. Yeah,
he's just a brain, and the eyes just look at him out of the jar, and as they slowly die, just kind of glare at him.
And that's one of the scenes that I want to see so bad in a YouTube, or not YouTube, a Netflix or Hulu miniseries so bad.
Yeah.
I want to see this finale. I want to know the sound that someone can come up with. What is the sound of 1,000, human brains dying? Like it was like your electrodes crying. Or just like, I want to know. I want a sound designer on this.
All that static, but not quite.
Yeah. What is that?
Oh man, I don't know. That was fucking real dark. That whole scene. Oh shit, yeah. And I think it is right after that we get the final reveal from Satan, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Basically, Kassler decides not to kill himself so that he won't become a brain in a jar.
Yep.
Hold on, give me you two keep discussing. I'm gonna be back in 1 second.
And then he ends up starting the psychotherapy, because we kind of been jumping back and forth via flashback, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's where they end up.
That's where they end up. Oh, well, I guess we should talk about Sam Zalazno being Samael.
Samael. Okay, is that what it is?
Yeah.
So I only know that, that they revealed that Sam is Satan's son. You know, he's my best angel. He's, you know.
Yeah, he's Samael. He's mentioned. If you go back to session 6, Samael is one of the demon princes mentioned in that list.
Oh.
Because he's one of the more famous demon princes, kind of in cultural history. He, if you'll note, he comes up a lot actually in God, what's that book? Oh, there was a book that was written that was used a lot for
Paradise Lost?
No, what was that book that a lot of people refer to, like Alan Moore and them refer to, where they talk about like Samael and the demon princess and all that kind of stuff? It comes up a lot. It's related to the Torah. It's a religious text.
The Necronomicon?
No.
Dead Sea Scrolls?
No.
Nope.
No, it's...
I'm not sure.
Let me see if I can
Maybe
find it.
it's not the Quran.
Well, we were just discussing the idea of Sam Zalazno comes out as Samael, the demon.
Samael, the first angel, Satan's first devil, basically. His best boy.
Yeah.
Best boy, says son.
Yeah. So I thought that was that.
It's
it's
the Kabbalah. That's what it is.
Oh, the Kabbalah. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, that's what that is. I just had someone come in and ask for books on the Kabbalah. So okay.
Yeah.
Now I know what they were asking about.
Yeah. Interesting. I didn't know that Samuel was like a figure in that. I know he's big in Paradise Lost and in the Inferno.
Well,
like
the reason I talk about things like the Kabbalah is because in a further extrapolation, for example, the Wheel of Time is based on names from the Forsaken are based on names from the Kabbalah, so they're named after Samael, Asmodin, like all these characters from religious texts. So Samael actually comes up a lot in other types of fiction as well, not just more contemporary fiction.
Well, yeah, I mean, it also helps that it's kind of a derivative of a lot of those biblical names.
Yep, for sure.
I'm pretty sure that means like the glory of God in Old Hebrew, or gift of God, one of those two. I can remember the origins of my own name.
Yeah.
Because anything that has L in it is a God-related name origin. Yeah, so I thought it was kind of weird that they dropped that in, or that Levin drops that in at the end of like, well, he's, like after all this thing of like building him up as definitely Satan, he's like, well, he's not quite Satan, but he's real close.
Just the closest. Yeah.
Is it any more Satan than he'd be literally Satan, but he's not.
Yeah.
He's missing that 1 millimeter of Satanness.
Because actual Satan is not an actual being living in the... Yeah.
There's not an actual dude Satan, but this is like the Jesus of Satans.
Yep.
Yeah.
More or less. Whereas, and again, I guess he's the mirror image of Kassler, where Kassler is the one who keeps, I guess, turning the other cheek and keeps eating all this like horrible punishment on everyone in his life's behalf. But Enzelazzo is constantly dishing it out. Like he takes no responsibility for anything and always is crushing everyone nearby. Yeah, the Jesus of Satans. That's right, chat. Yeah, Samael, son of Satan, as my note says, no shocker. Dash, big jerk.
Dash, big jerk, yes.
Dash, big jerk.
Yeah. So, yeah, man. Fucking Salazzo, what a son of a bitch. So, hold on. I'm trying to dig through my giant pile of notes here to find all my Zalazzo-related comments.
We haven't talked about Satan's answer.
Yeah, so the final thing. Yeah, I guess that's what we'll touch on here. I'm cleaning up sticky notes like a motherfucker. All right. Yeah, so when the two of them finally get to the end, and they're in the final session, and they're having the conversation. Kastler says, Kastler says, "I've cured you. You finally, Satan, you figured out like why you came to me, and like what you actually want, and like you had your catharsis, and now you can go on, and like I've helped your life, and you can improve things now." And Satan kind of fights him a little bit, and he's like, "Well, no, not really," but it finally comes to the conclusion that okay, actually, you're right. I have improved, even if it's just a little bit. He says, "Fine, okay, I promised you this thing, so I'll tell you the great secret, the big answer." And he says, "You know what? Do you want to know? I'm going to tell you right now." And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, life is hell."
Yeah.
Right,
So,
there's no. This is where you go to be punished.
yeah.
You're going to be tortured forever, and then you die, and you start it again.
But this,
although he doesn't quite say that, but it's strongly implied.
this concept is foreshadowed earlier on when he talks about being the god of the earth, of material things.
He says this every time.
Yeah,
he's the god of the earth. He's the god of man. He's the god of this world. Like he keeps laying it down, and it never quite connects because he doesn't quite say it outright. And I thought that I was really well. So I was satisfied in that conclusion because like it both presented the question or the answer, and then the question, which is what I was looking for the whole time. Because I feel like every good book asks a question and then tries to answer it. And I just couldn't figure out what that question was. And so this is it, is what is life? Life is hell.
Yep.
But like, I felt like that just made me ask more questions. Cause like, if this is hell, then what is it? What is heaven? Is there a limbo? Where's the real place? Like, is there a real place, or is it only heaven or hell? Or is it only hell? Because it kind of sounds like Satan is the only thing, like, you only ever hear from him.
I just want to point out, though, in the Divine Comedy in Dante, that limbo is separate from purgatorio. That they are separate things, and separate concepts.
That's true. That is correct. Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's like crazy papal.
Sure,
bagel.
but I'm just pointing it out that like in the major text that has influenced this work, like they are separate concepts. With purgatorio being not so much as a listless existence, but a way of throwing off your sin and climbing up to heaven, though it takes hundreds of thousands of years to do.
True. Yeah, you can. Yeah, even. What am I trying to say? Even if you weren't a true believer, you can still, if you don't deny the existence of God, then you can claw your way up. Whereas Kastler explicitly denies both the existence of God and Satan, and so he can never really be in either realm.
Yeah,
because both of them want to eject him.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I loved Satan being rejected by his own son, of course.
Yeah.
Because as he was ejected from heaven, so his son was ejected from hell. Right? Like, it's just that continued... And that's actually a recurring theme of this, is that cycle, the cyclical nature of each of these things, is people... Like, the same thing keeps happening over and over again.
Yeah. Just to finish up my thought on the Divine Comedy...
Sorry,
The idea being that Dante is being led down by Virgil into the depths of hell, which is like, so he goes down and then he comes back up the mountain of Purgatorio until he reaches Paradiso, aka heaven.
Well, because he has to go, like, you can't leave without going all the way down.
Yeah.
There's no climbing out. There's only climbing deeper.
Yeah.
And
the idea is that it's not so much as like a down and up, but like you continue going down, and then you're actually the hole turns out to be a mountain on the other side.
Right. No. That's what I meant. Is like you don't go up again. You just there's only a descent.
Yeah.
So I guess that begs the question: who is Virgil in this scenario?
Ooh, who is Virgil in this scenario?
Is it the lawyer?
No, I would.
This incompetent goofball who just like kind of leads him down, down and down.
I think it was Bernie Kohler.
No, that doesn't make sense.
You don't think? Even though he's kind of the guy that Kessler always looks to for answers?
I don't think so. That's just not that's not what, like, Virgil doesn't answer questions. Virgil just gets you out.
Right. So maybe
Zalazo is almost Virgil. Yeah, or Satan.
Satan is Virgil in this scenario, maybe?
Yeah, you know what? I think he kind of is, because he's the one who keeps by his side, and he's not necessarily like pulling him up, but he's leading him through, and he's taking him on that guided tour of the descent.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, you know what? Maybe the reader is Virgil. We, as that observer and the accompanying person, are following him down through hell.
Wait.
I don't know. I'm just throwing things at the wall, seeing what sticks.
Counter proposal. What if we're Dante and Kessler is Virgil?
I don't think that tracks.
No, even though Kessler, through his own descent, is leading us through hell.
But he doesn't know that. Virgil knows what he's doing.
Sure, but
I mean, like, Charon in the Inferno acts more in that role of guiding them down and being the tour guide through the different circles, at least at the beginning, and then pulling them back up out at the very end. So I don't know if there's a top level top narrative.
I don't think there is either. I don't think there is a Virgil character per se.
Honestly, I think Satan kind of plays that role, because he's the guy who's kind of constantly pulling him down. That's why he wants that therapy, because he's got to bring him down to the bottom before they're in the same place, more or less.
Right.
I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you can interpret this, and I feel like I'd have to read it again with like I made a character chart and like plot that out again and see what conclusion I get. So yeah, it's interesting that this is a book that really strongly benefits from multiple readings. Because I went back and reread a couple of the chapters, like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. And
I think this is a book that would stand really well with some of that Borges style detective work of, like, there's nothing really wasted in this book. Everything is a reference to something else in a certain sense. So finding those allegories and those metaphors and all that, and picking out those little elements and figuring out what is what on your second, third reading, sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And man, now I gotta watch that movie, because I need to see this turned into an abominable TV movie. I think maybe that says I don't need to watch it. Hard to say.
Watch the one that they made. Don't watch it. It's not okay. They...
Oh yeah, triggered is right.
There are just so many things wrong with what they did, and it just really has everything to do with how they changed the path of Kessler's life. They didn't go down the path of Kessler's life, okay? In this terrible movie, you know, Kessler is already the victim of having lost his family, which includes a wife and daughter. And he's essentially portrayed as just this cocky psychiatrist that goes to this institution where there's a guy at the head who they changed the names just a little bit, but it's basically Sam.
It wasn't Delazzo.
Yeah, it was really like something like.
It changed one letter.
Yeah, and I think his name's not Sai. It's something. It's basically the character Sai, and then the character, and he's just like, well, man, I know you think you're a really great therapist with all these great methods, but the way I do things is the way things work. So good luck. And so there's really just this weird tension the entire time about one patient who is I think Cheryl is who they pick it is, and I'm like, that makes me even more mad that they're like taking characters from the book and creating scenarios that didn't even happen. Okay, and there's just a lot of focus on like he's trying to like use this miracle, methodology which doesn't involve medication and just involves like talking to her like a real person. Screw all of her issues. I'm just going to talk to her like a person and reason with her, and that's why she's crazy, because we're just not getting to the meat of the issue. You're like,
that's so. Oh.
No, and then
not
so
what this
Satan,
book is about.
None of it, and so Satan is this guy who decides to just check himself in, and he's like, well, I'm Satan, and I just want to talk to somebody about, and I'm like, okay, part of the reason why it's so good is that Satan doesn't have a body. It's that he's just this voice that does all of this manipulating around everything. So the fact that they just make him a guy who walks into Counselor's office and Counselor's like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever, you're Satan, haha. And then like the way that the movie takes it and like tries to make it more real to Counselor, but they're also like, the movie portrays Counselor as basically just being dramatically completely unstable over the loss of his family, and like that's like related to Satan in some way. Like it is not the book at all, and I hate it so much. And if you watch it, you'll be like, yeah, this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah, that sounds like they tried to take the emotional touchstones, but then none of the context for them.
They've removed like everything that makes any of the emotional like moments matter. They took it away, and so instead there's just left with this guy overacting because he's haunted by the memory of his wife and daughter, and it's like, and the Satan guy is just a dude who comes in to just torture him, like, and it's just really weird. And who did we say was the Ice Cube or whatever, I don't know, the dude that Sinbad, is that his name?
Sinbad is in this?
Isn't he?
Yeah,
I think he plays.
Yeah,
Sinbad's acting in it.
And in the end, Sam and the Satan character and literally everybody else in this place are like the same person, and they're basically just like, welcome to hell, and it's like.
This is a problem with a lot of adaptations, is where they try and drop in these like important moments, but they don't earn them.
None of it.
It's just it's real bad. Yeah, and Sinbad. It's Sinbad. That's how bad it is.
Sinbad. Yeah.
It's the worst sin is to be bad. This bad.
I was just really. I have never complained so loudly without finishing a movie. Like, and then Lupa. There is Leo is just a guy who's one of the patients. He's just some dude that takes pictures. That's it. He's just one of the patients. Has no significance other than that. Lupa is just a cafeteria girl. Okay, that's like. What? Like he keeps throwing in characters from the book, right? Or the director or whoever. And which is why I kept having these moments of, maybe this will get better. And it just kept getting worse because he kept taking these characters way out of the context that they were originally in, and so it like meant nothing. All of this just meant nothing.
God damn it. Yep.
I hated it so much. Worst movie ever.
Well, and yeah, this book especially doesn't benefit from being turned into a movie because, like, one of the big differences between a book and a movie is, like, you're telling a story in a book, whereas with a film, you're telling that story. Like, you have that particular face attached to it. It's a very defined kind of thing, whereas so much of this is the reader being able to project their own stuff onto that character, like all the pain that, all the shit that's ever screwed you over, all the times you've been like, the world is fucking me, and like but like when you get a story with a person's face on it, it's like, well, the world is fucking them, not me. Like this has nothing to do with me, and so like it feels like it's detaching that emotional context and just kind of letting it float without, like I said, without earning it. And I don't know, adaptations are a mess a lot of the time.
By murdering this unknown family that we never have any emotion for in the first place. I mean, that's my number one. Like, this is why it didn't work. Like, if they had,
for no reason.
It was just bad. It was just to fit everything into a time constraint, and I hated it.
Yeah.
And then making that the interactions with the Cheryl character, and like there's this big scene where she jumps off the roof, and that's like connected to how his daughter dies, because apparently his daughter had committed suicide too, and the wife committed suicide. It's just like, because he was a bad therapist is like essentially what you get from the end, and it's like that.
It's a terrible therapist.
I was like, but that's not fucking why this book is so good. Like, not even, like, that doesn't even happen. Like, none of this shit even happens, and you're not even taking me on like an interesting interpretation of all of this emotional trauma. It's just really bad. It's just bad.
Man.
Okay, so homework from last week. Fictional cast list, go.
I did not do the casting. I'm not gonna lie. I'm sorry.
Okay, so watching the movie made me think a little bit more about that, because I want you to just go watch it and see how bad it is. And I had to ask myself some questions, some personal questions about were there did I have certain expectations about characters that got completely reassigned by how they were casted, essentially. And so I had to think a lot about, like, I mean, they don't really mention a whole lot of description other than like someone has like dark hair, or like Kessler's got like dark curly hair or something. Like, they don't really mention a whole lot. So
I think Zalazzo's the only one who gets a really defined
description.
Which is
why Ron Perlman was like, that's him.
Yeah.
And everybody else, I couldn't put anybody else to a face. I thought that was weird.
That's what I kind of felt. That's why I spent a little bit of time. I'm not going to lie, I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I spent a little bit of time, and it's like, I don't know whose face goes to any of these people, because it's not about their face.
No, not at all.
It's so much, like, almost everyone is kind of just the floating entity of their personality, the same way Satan is, like, non-physical.
Yeah.
Like, they have characteristics, like, we know a lot about Lupa's boobs, and we know Sai has curly hair, and Zalazzo is very blonde, but that's almost all we know about them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it seems weird. It felt really odd to try and put a face on it. And like I said, like, trying to change a character who is, like, a character into the character, I feel like is a significant... Like, trying to define them, collapse the waveform into a single person is hard to do, and diminishes what the story is trying to do as well. So, I don't know, that's just my opinion on adaptations. But, yeah, it just didn't feel like it was something that would lend itself well to that. And evidently it doesn't.
Did you make a cast list, Brendan?
I do, but I can share it off the screen.
Yes.
I can share it off stream if we want. That's fine.
What?
Yeah, that would be great.
I mean, it's up to you.
Come on, you don't want to tell us?
Okay, so
just real quick.
The first one that came to mind, like Ron Perlman's cool. I love Ron Perlman. I'm down with that.
Ron Perlman for all the characters.
He's real tall.
I am into every role.
He's real tall. He's got those eyes. I'm cool with that for Zalazzo.
And he played Hellboy, so he's already a Satan.
I really want Stellan Skarsgård to play Leo Sisliski.
Not
how you pronounce that.
Stellan Skarsgård?
To play Zlick?
Still plays Zlick, yes. Leo Zlick.
Okay, yeah, alright. Oh,
okay,
wait.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yes.
Because he can do... Because he's got the range for that, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be a controversial one. I really want Stanley Tucci for Kasler.
Stanley
I'm Googling everything.
Same.
Oh, yes! I don't even know actors, so this wouldn't have worked for me. Yes, this is what I want! This is...
Oh, yeah.
Because he can rock a pair of horn-rimmed
Totally.
glasses. He's attractive
horn
enough
rims.
to be believable, but he's not like so attractive to like throw you completely off. He's got witty dialogue, like he's good at witty dialogue and can do that sarcasm like real nice. So like I feel like he could play that role fairly effectively.
Interesting. Yeah, I think
He's
you're
got,
right.
and he's got enough of a bookish look like to really fit
Yeah.
that.
And when he does have his hair grown out, it's like that bright curliness, that Italian curly hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty.
That's it,
that's
Oh,
dead
spot
on.
I really like Ian McKellen as Mr. Katzman.
I'm less enthused by that particular
Sure.
casting.
That's just kind of what I came up
Katzman.
with.
Katzman's the one who says that he has all these stories, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one who's constantly predicting his death, basically.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I feel like... Anyway, keep
Morgan
going.
Freeman.
I want to know
He
more.
he could be like a lot of people. Like you're just looking for like an old man
Yeah.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, if he were alive.
if he were alive. The women were significantly harder. But I could see Charlize Theron as Lupa. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Because ages is kind of a thing in this. Like ages of the characters because it transitions over time.
Yeah.
So Charlize Theron can do young and old pretty effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Young and older.
Maybe.
And
There's
then,
some CGI required.
yeah, probably a
It's
little
like
bit.
20
Good
years
makeup.
difference.
You can get good
Well, no,
makeup.
because
They
Lupa,
do
we
good
don't
job.
see Lupa as young as we do Vita.
I guess not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess not.
She has a lot less screen time as young than Vita does.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
so Vita, I was thinking maybe like Gal Gadot or something like that. I don't know.
You're just naming current actors. Come on now.
What? I like Gal Gadot.
Yeah, I got stuck with the women and I felt bad. I was like,
The women are hard because they are a lot more representational and a lot more ideas.
That's what I thought too, Erica, is that I don't think she's not voluptuous enough to be Vita.
I don't know. I just throwing it out there.
Because Kassler's whole thing is he's just way into boobs. Like, that's basically his only motivation for meeting women ever. Even at the very end, he's like, well, I've changed my ways. I'm going to meet a nice flat-chested woman.
yeah.
And my note for that was, well, let's not go crazy now. But, yeah, I don't know. You got to...
Yeah.
Hello, Erica. Yes, you are present. Welcome, you live. We stream, you live.
So yeah, I thought the women were significantly harder to kind of figure out.
I think there's a lot of ways that you could push this, and depending on how you cast it, it could be like almost any kind of movie you want.
Yeah.
Who's the lawyer?
Oh, that's a good question. Who's Bernie?
And yeah, who's Bernie? That's very important.
Oh, I want oh man, what the fuck?
And B is also a woman. Who...
I want
Yeah.
Will Ferrell as Bernie. Just think about the scenes where he's begging him to be like, it's like, it'll be pretty cool. Like, homosexuality is hard at first, but like once you get used to it, it's pretty great. Just imagine Will Ferrell trying to argue that. I think he would sell.
I'm also really not into the idea of soft porn Will Ferrell scenes, so okay. I'm really...
True, but like, I don't know. It turns me off as much as the actual scenes in the book did, so it seems like it's lining up for me. I don't know. It was just my first thought. I don't know who else.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's complicated question.
Yep, for sure.
What I would say is that we should all think about this, and then on Brendan's next stream, we should just spam chat with our casting suggestions.
Yeah.
I really want to think of. I really actually want to do this assignment now because, like, I care very much.
Well,
my cast. But
No, Nick Offerman should be the lawyer.
Nick Offerman.
Nate?
Oh. For Bernie?
No, he should be the lawyer.
yeah, I see him more as the.
Judgment at Erica for that.
He doesn't. He's too serious.
Yeah, but he'd be great for that lawyer of that like deadpan like I can get you custody. Do you want custody?
Yeah.
You should go for custody.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, you don't want custody? I'm not gonna do much then. So yeah.
Oh, and then the end scene that I've got. We have this killer information that's going to totally seal the deal.
yeah.
Yeah, Nick Offerman, totally like
Yeah.
completely straight
Like, oh
faced.
shit. Yeah.
Completely straight faced.
Who's Vita then?
I don't know.
I know Lupa and Vita. I would have to.
Lupa and
I'd
Vita
have to
are
look-
tough.
I feel like. That's a yeah. What's her name? Maybe not. I was gonna say for older Vita, like Tilda Swinton, because she looks so drained, like all the moisture has been pulled from her body.
I've always imagined that Vita, as the thing goes on, becomes more like she's certainly cold, but she becomes more like vital. I don't know, like she's going out and living her fancy lifestyle, you know, and the kids are just because they're the victims in the situation, and she's just living life with Sam. You know, that's like I feel like that's how I always imagine that scenario, but they don't go into those details, you know.
Well,
so
yeah, and they kind of describe at one point the way like she's getting thinner and thinner
Yeah.
as
that's
things
her
go on.
stress. Yeah, but so
Yeah.
I imagine it's more she becomes back into herself after the divorce.
Maybe.
But
yeah, but they never say it.
They never mention that at all.
I'm changing my opinion. I want ScarJo for Lupa.
I just watched Ghost in the Shell, so I don't know.
That you should
well.
not
Yeah,
judge
I
based
think
on
she
that.
would. Yeah, she would do good.
Be fine.
She did play. Oh, what was that role in that movie with that one guy that he's like a total jock, and she's like this Italian girlfriend, and he's addicted to porn. And...
Oh, yeah, you're talking about. Oh my god, I know what movie. Don John.
Don John. Yeah,
That movie
she was
sucked.
the-
But yes, I know what you're talking about.
the good girlfriend for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, her character from that, I can see that. Okay. Yeah, man. I don't know. Yeah, this is an assignment. Everyone, write down your selections and secretly submit them to Satan at accidentalorigin.com. I'm doing it now.
As Leo. I'm like, I like who you've picked for Leo, but I had somebody else in mind too. What is his name? See, I don't know actor names. But anyway.
All right. Yeah.
Accidental.
I think that was. I think we're gonna have to think about that a little bit. But for now, this is gonna be, I think, the end of the episode.
Yep.
Because we've gone a little bit over time, but we had a lot to talk about this time.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
We had a lot. This book is real dense.
But it's so good, and none's wasted, like Brendan keeps
Yeah.
saying, and that's why I love it so much, and I can reread it a million times, because there is no long description of a wall that later doesn't matter, you know? Like, it's...
Yeah.
Everything that's in there you need. You couldn't cut any of it. Including the bit that I didn't have, which I needed that.
Yeah,
'Cause it
there was
contextualizes
definitely
some stuff.
definitely
There's- yeah.
context that you missed by not having that.
Some books you can miss 30 pages and nothing happens. Not this one.
I know, that's what I felt, Erica, is like, I got to that part and I'm like, is this
No!
intended to be like this? Is Is this a literary device to fuck with me?
That would be funny, though.
I kind of hoped, and then it was like, no, it's just a faulty book.
Shit. I didn't check for that.
It was cool. I loved it. I thought it was some secret thing. It was like, oh, will you notice that this book is missing 2 chapters? It turned out almost no. Yeah. So, okay. All right. So we read Jeremy Levin's Satan, His Psychotherapy and Cure by the unfortunate Dr. Kassler. Just some poor schmuck. Damn good book. Really slow burn, but worth it at the end for sure. I was not sold on the first half. The last maybe like third or quarter totally sells it.
They just kicked the feet right out for me in that last scene.
Yep.
Just
Yeah. Yep. Just.
Exactly.
I was waiting.
The rug gets pulled.
Just like that was what I was waiting for this entire time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so much buildup, and then it just like blam, and then, so it's
the
great.
trial. That's the trial.
Oh,
yeah.
the friggin' trial. So there's so much. There's a lot of payoff, a lot of pain, a lot of stuff to think about, and it's really heavily backloaded, but totally worth it. So yeah, I personally would recommend this book for anyone who thinks they want to read a thing that isn't what they think it's going to be, I guess.
It's a good read.
I guess I don't think anyone here disagrees too much with that takeaway.
Yep.
Brendan, any final thoughts?
I enjoyed it. It was an interesting blend of historical, like general fiction and science fiction and fantasy in like a really weird way, which I thought was interesting. I'm not gonna lie, I probably identified with Kassler way too much.
Same.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of makes me uncomfortable how much I identified with him, and I was just like, oh, maybe I need to rethink some of my life. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I think a second reading would really bring it out for me either way. But that's something for the future.
And Wicked, do you have any final thoughts, feelings,
If anybody needs help getting a copy, just contact me and I will hook you up as best as I can. Whether that means providing you with a website to go here and this is too high of a price, wait for a while.
All right. Fair enough. So we're for going forward, we're going to take the next month off because I have a lot of stuff going on, and we're going to retool a little bit going into like our second year of Read Write. So things are going to be a little bit different when we come back next time. We will. I don't have a date for that yet.
No, we will. Sam and I will discuss, and we'll figure it out. Yeah.
So yeah, stay tuned. Stay turned. Keep watching Accidental Origin. This might show up on my channel. It might be on Accidental Origin. I don't know exactly how it's going to be. The world is in constant flux. So, yeah. I'm MC Pepper Pockets. This is my co-host, Cosmic Zord / Accidental Origin / Brendan, depending on what he's deciding to be today.
Yep.
And our guest and good book bringer, Wicked West.
Yay!
Thank you guys for being on, and thank you everyone in chat for tagging along and giving us all your good thoughts.
Thanks for hanging out, guys.